Would you say that 99% of all movies today are garbage?
In an age where most movies are referred to as content, I would say that 99% of most movies are pretty bad. I always try to, like, when I say 99%, I mean of mainstream. It really is, when you look at, and especially I think one of the best examples of this is the sort of Zack Snyder's Justice League, and how that was, bungled. How that was bungled, how the Star Wars franchise was bungled, how they could not. I mean, to me, I'm the studio executive in charge of Star Wars, and we're making a new Star Wars movie, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put Han, Luke, and Leia in a scene together. And the fact that that moment, we will never be able to have that moment in cinema when Carrie Fisher was alive, that to me is, I mean, that's malpractice. That's studio malpractice. The fact that they had what Zack Snyder's vision, what he was building up to be, and I think seeing the 4-hour final product of what Zack Snyder's Justice League turned out to be, and that they made this garbage thing, Joss Whedon. I mean, it's disheartening to me to see that. I will say on an indie level, I tend to take like a glass half full view, and I tend to always look for the positive when it comes to indie films, because you cannot compare you can't compare an indie movie shot in 12 days for $10,000 to Justice League, whichever version you're talking about. You can't compare, because in my mind, there is no excuse for a studio to fail when they put out a blockbuster movie. You have no excuse. Your job is to entertain me, not lecture me, not lecture me. Your job is to entertain me. Unfortunately, we live in a time, back in the day when Star Wars was first made, I feel like they were checking one box, and it was called fun. And now there's a million boxes that must be checked. There are all sorts of noting and committees and this thing, and this is where you end up with, that last Star Wars movie by J.J. Abrams is unwatchable. I mean, it's garbage. It informs exactly everything wrong with the studio system. It's terrible. So I look at like the Justice League debacle, the Star Wars franchise, and how that was mishandled. And I look at that and I just think, how could that have been done? Where was they're ever like looking at like the fans and what they think? What do the fans think of this stuff? Are they satisfying the fans? Most normal people don't care, is it entertaining? I'm taking my family, especially how expensive it is to the movie theater experience, which is going away, right? The theatrical experience of seeing a movie is going away. You had better entertain me. And I think that whether Hollywood notices it or not, I think that people don't really like politics woven into fairly mainstream, which should be mainstream entertainment experiences. And I think we're seeing that more and more. It's unbelievable to me. I think you're leaving money on the table for not giving what the customer is looking for in that experience. But so in my mind, studios, there's no excuse to fail. You have the best people in marketing. You have the most talented actors, craftsmen when it comes to special effects and cinematography, music. There's no excuse for that to fail. And I think part of the failing of Hollywood is that the marketing is so good sometimes. I've argued with friends sometimes that I believe that there should be a key art. I mean, there are key art awards, for key movie poster art. I'm a fan of movie poster art. There's a really good documentary about movie poster art called 24 by 36. Check out that documentary. But there should almost be a marketing award. And here's the problem, the conundrum. The marketing for these movies is so good, the product doesn't live up to the marketing. So, I mean, I got chills watching the trailers for The Rise of Skywalker. I was so excited to see that movie. I was a kid when I saw Star Wars. I'm seeing the 9th movie in this saga. I cannot believe how horrible it turned out. It's really, to me, it's malpractice what happened to that franchise. and how it's divided fandom fighting over things that are really irrelevant. I think it's well, not entirely irrelevant. The fact that they're just like, you're seeing people from within that company attack the fans is just like, it's, I hate to see it because I'm like, nerds are my people. I go to San Diego Comic-Con every year. I have since the 90s gone to San Diego Comic-Con. And so to see people fractured over this is really disheartening. But when it comes to studio movies, there's no excuse not to fail. Now, when it comes to small indie movies, to make a good movie under those circumstances, without the resources, without the money, without the great people in marketing, without the budget, without all of the best of circumstances, to make an indie movie that like actually you can be touched and moved by, that is something to be said, which is why I've always gravitated toward indie film. You know, it's a miracle when you see something that's watchable out of a studio. But I don't know, like, where are the executives? I mean, other than like maybe coming to mind like a Kevin Feige, which, you know, maybe his best days are behind him. You know, I can't think of a studio executive that is a visionary these days.
Are those the jocks? The nerds are the nerds are the consumers?
Yeah.
They're the jocks?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at like the era, the 70s being the last great era of American filmmaking, we really are losing that American identity because we become so fractured as a culture. And I think that you know, where's the movie that we all love without debate that we've all loved? Exactly. I don't know that there is one. And that's really, you know, I really, and at the end of the day, I miss loving Star Wars. I miss loving it. I used to love it. And now I'm saddened by that franchise. I'm using that as like the best example. There's a lot of other examples. We could talk about the Terminator franchise. We could talk about Star Trek. We can talk about these sort of dead franchises that have sort of lost their way. But when you look at, like, I just saw a documentary called Laddie, L-A-D-D-I, about Alan Ladd, the visionary studio executive who basically greenlit Star Wars and protected George Lucas. I'm just afraid we're never going to see another George Lucas, right? We're never going to see another real creative visionary that changes the industry because everything is so corporate. You know, it's like, what did Francis Ford Coppola say? Factory filmmaking. That's the age in which we live. There's factory filmmaking, which is a product and content, and then there's up and coming indie filmmakers. And, you know, when I talked about checking those boxes earlier, a lot of it is like, is it going to appeal international? I mean, let's be honest. The box office internationally, and especially in China, is much bigger than the United States. That market, those dollars. So you can't make a movie for the United States anymore. You have to make a movie for the world, which is fine. But I think in a way that's sort of diluting our identity as a people, as Americans, as we become more fractured. And it's distressing to see. You know, you see it when it's like, God, I was having a conversation with a friend, because of course the movies are always an ongoing conversation with friends. If you're in my circle, it will come up. And it's like, when you look at like when certain decisions are organic, or when you see when it's shoehorned in, right? When certain things are shoehorned in, like the trope that's become a trope now of the strong female lead. It's just, Ripley was a great character. Like, just write a great character, not try to shoehorn in a type, right? And you kind of know it when you see it. You go, oh, this is cliche. You're trying to shoehorn in a type rather than like, that's just a great character. You're also talking to a guy who, when I ever play a video game, I always choose a female character. I don't know why, I just do that.
As someone who has watched so many movies, as someone who has made their own films, why do you think there's so many bad films that are made?
Well, look, the reason there's so many bad films these days is, I think, well, one, the barrier to entry is much easier. But I also think that that's on an indie level. I see bad indie films too, right? I usually want to help them and say, this was your lesson. Okay, you'll make a better movie in your second movie if you don't quit. But when it comes to studio films, there's just too many notes. There are too many people that It's sort of, the modern day ball player, right? Like, it's just like, it's not about the passion for playing the game. Not about a passion of, hitting the ball and hearing the roar of the crowd. It's the licensing deals, and it's this and the sales of that and the TV commercials and whatnot. I when I look back at the movie The Player, which came out when I first moved to Los Angeles, Robert Altman's The Player, things haven't changed. The subject has changed. I mean, that was it was erotic thrillers, and it was Julia Roberts and Bruce Willis were being cast in every movie that was pitched in that film. Now it's superhero movies, but it's really too many cooks, and I feel like the people being elevated to these positions are good executives, but they're not people that know the material, the heart of the material. And when you look at the history of, creatives who really created something like a George Lucas or a Gene Roddenberry, things begin to lose their way when they get sidelined, right? You really need those. I feel like the modern day Hollywood now, and especially with streaming changing the game, theaters, the survival of theaters being in doubt, really, we may live at a time where maybe the billion-dollar blockbuster may not be back for a long time. And that may end up being a good thing, right? Like, let's make, I'll joke with a friend and I'll say my favorite Spider-Man movie is the one where Mary Jane is in peril at the end, which is pretty much all the Spider-Man movies. Or my favorite science fiction movie is the movie where that thing blows up at the end. That's every science fiction movie, right? Which is why, and The Empire Strikes Back was because it wasn't about we got to do and blow up the thing. It's boring. It's just creatively bankrupt, which is why Empire Strikes Back holds up. Everybody says, oh, it's the best Star Wars movie. I mean, you could argue, but it's because it didn't do that thing that happened in all the other movies. And so trying to go against doing that thing, or fighting a blue light. There's a lot of fighting a blue light that happens in films. Fighting a blue light, saving the person at the end, the thing that blows up at the end. And I say defy those cliches at all costs. And it's funny because you see, there's still people that are able to work within studio system and deliver worthwhile films. Christopher Nolan being among them. I've quite admired his work, although he has a tendency to make things a little overly complex for no reason, just to brag about how smart he is. But there's always a point in his films, and you'll notice it once I point it out, where a character in a Christopher Nolan movie will say, we have to go down the thing and grab the thing to do this and shoot this. It's Captain Narrative, right? It's the person that stops the movie to tell you what's happening in the movie, to explain what's going to happen so that the audience, the dumb audience, understands. And to me, so you got that studio note, and he compromises in a way that doesn't completely destroy what he's trying to achieve as a filmmaker. So he's willing to play ball. But I just see, and I think, the most recent example being Zack Snyder's Justice League, and the fact that universe will remain unexplored, unfortunately, which is disheartening. You look at that, and I think part of the reason that Zack Snyder's Justice League was suppressed was because, once it came out and you see these are the choices the studio executives made. They decided to hire Joss Whedon. They decided to change everything about it in exchange for this. Like, it makes them look bad, right? Because what Zack Snyder was trying to do was much, much better, clearly. Whether you enjoy it personally or not, it was objectively much better than what Joss Whedon ended up coming up with, which was effectively a dumb cartoon, a live-action dumb cartoon. So,
what about adaptations? Do you think has that always been around, or is that something?
Adaptations in what
Adaptations
sense?
Of popular books. Not necessarily, it doesn't have to be a franchise, but
think about it. Here's what's dead is originality. I mean, people forget what George Lucas created in Star Wars was something completely original. I mean, yes, it was influenced by so many things, Westerns, Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers serials and whatnot. But almost nothing that you see isn't based, nothing that you see in the studio realm, it's all based on something pre-existing material. It's a book, a graphic novel, a comic book, a thing that kind of proved the concept, right? And then, or a franchise, right? It's a thing that, you know, whether it's Star Wars, Star Trek, whatever, you know, comic book characters that have been around for years. It's very rare that there'll be something that's a wholly original concept. So I kind of, you know, I really, it would really be interesting if studios rolled the dice more to get something like a Joker, what Todd Phillips did with the Joker, right? That Joker film, which was a low budget movie, right? I mean, I chatted with him about it. I'm sure you can look up quotes, Todd Phillips talking about how he pitched them doing some sort of DC Black series. It would be these sort of one-off films that would be stories that didn't really fit with any sort of larger continuity, that were like smaller movies where you could explore a part of that universe. And the fact that that movie did so well, you know, from being praised from you know, in terms of at award season, I think is proves his concept was the right way to go. And people forget, Todd Phillips came from independent film. You know, I knew him back in the day when he was making documentaries. He famously has that Frat House documentary that played Sundance and then never was released. So I think you can find it on YouTube.
What about Mank?
What's that?
What about Mank?
Mank, yeah. I don't know how you make a Mank, you know? Like, here's the thing. I look at Mank and I'm like, I love Mank, but I went to film school and I've seen Citizen Kane 100 times, and I've read books about Citizen Kane. And one of my favorite DVD commentaries is the one that Roger Ebert did for Citizen Kane. So I know a lot of the backstory, and I feel like it's almost impossible to watch Mank. You have to watch Citizen Kane. Maybe watch Citizen Kane first and then watch Mank, and then rewatch Citizen Kane. But yeah, I think Mank is incredible, you know. But I think Mank is for film nerds. I mean, I think it's brilliant that David Fincher was able to get that film made in the way that he made it. You know, it's sort of a story about the genre made within the style of the old school genre, but with modern tools, and then sort of laced with political commentary, maybe a bit too heavy-handed at times. But I really enjoyed Mank. But that's not a mainstream audience movie. So kudos to Netflix for that. But yeah, I wouldn't say that, you know, I like to be an optimist. So I don't know that 99% of the studio movies are bad. Maybe it's more like 97. We can quibble about the percentages, but
Sure.
you know, stuff leaks through. That was a rant, by the way.
No, that's good. That's what we
modern
want.
state of Hollywood.
That's fantastic. I was going to add to it with Game of Thrones, but that's good. We'll stop. Okay.